Millionaire comes home early and freezes at the sight of a beggar in his house. Jonathan Parker parked his Tesla in the private garage of the penthouse apartment and decided to enter through the kitchen to surprise Catherine, who was supposed to be returning from a trip that day. But it was he who received the biggest shock of his life when he found an unknown woman bathing a baby in the kitchen's marble sink. The woman was softly humming a lullaby while carefully holding the child, who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. She wore simple, worn-out clothes, but her hands were gentle as she handled the little one. Jonathan stood frozen in the doorway, unable to comprehend what was happening. "What are you doing in my house?" Jonathan asked, trying to control his tone so as not to startle the baby. The woman turned calmly, showing no sign of nervousness or fear. Her eyes were serene, almost motherly. "Your son needed a bath," she replied naturally, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "My son?" Jonathan felt his heart race. "Ma'am, I don't have any children. And how did you get in here?" At that moment, Martha, the housekeeper who had worked there for over 10 years, appeared in the kitchen with a worried expression. "Mr. Jonathan, I tried to stop her, but she insisted she had permission from Mrs. Catherine," Martha explained, wringing her hands nervously. "She had the house key." The unknown woman finished drying the baby with one of the soft towels Catherine had bought on one of her trips to Italy. The little one gurgled happily, stretching his chubby arms toward her. "My name is Gladys Wilson," the woman said, rocking the baby in her arms. "I work as a cleaner in the office building where your firm is, Mr. Jonathan, and before you ask, yes, I have permission to be here." Jonathan's head spun. None of this made sense. Gladys pulled a golden key and a folded paper from her apron pocket. "Your wife gave me this 3 weeks ago," she continued, handing the note to Jonathan. With trembling hands, Jonathan unfolded the paper and immediately recognized Catherine's cursive handwriting. The message was brief. "Take good care of him, please, Gladys K." "This can't be happening," Jonathan murmured, rereading the note several times. "Catherine, where is my wife?" "I don't know, sir," Gladys replied honestly. "She showed up at my workplace 3 weeks ago very upset, said she urgently needed my help with a child. I thought it was strange, but she offered me a generous amount." Jonathan tried calling Catherine, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He hadn't been able to reach his wife for days. "Martha, when was the last time you saw Mrs. Catherine?" Jonathan asked, his voice thick with anxiety. "It's been a week, sir," the housekeeper replied, lowering her eyes. "She left with 2 large suitcases. Said she was visiting her mother in Denver, but it didn't seem like an ordinary trip." The baby began to cry, and Gladys instinctively started singing a soft melody. Jonathan froze when he recognized the song. It was the same one his own mother used to sing to him when he was little. "Where do you know that song from?" Jonathan asked, his voice choked. "My grandmother taught it to me," Gladys replied, still rocking the baby. "She said all American mothers know this song." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Jonathan rushed to Catherine's office in the apartment. The drawers were open, and several documents were scattered across the desk. Among them, he found bank statements showing large withdrawals from their joint account in recent weeks. Over $50,000 had been withdrawn. "Martha," Jonathan called from the office. "Come here, please." The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, holding a dish towel in her hands. "Have you noticed anything unusual about Mrs. Catherine's behavior lately?" Jonathan asked, showing her the bank statements. Martha hesitated before answering. "Well, sir, she's been very sad. Sometimes I'd find her crying in the living room, looking at that baby photo album she keeps on the shelf. And she's been getting a lot of strange phone calls. She always spoke quietly and hung up when someone came near." Jonathan felt a tightness in his chest. He knew about Catherine's obsession with having children, but thought she'd moved on after the failed treatments. Returning to the kitchen, he found Gladys Wilson sitting at the table feeding the baby a bottle. The scene was oddly familiar and cozy, despite all the confusion. "Gladys, this baby, whose is it?" Jonathan asked, sitting in the chair beside her. "When your wife came to me, she only said it was a child who needed temporary care," Gladys explained. "I didn't ask many questions, sir. I needed the job. But you must have suspected something. A wealthy woman shows up out of nowhere, asking you to care for a child in secret. Gladys sighed deeply. Mr. Parker, you seem like a good man. But your wife? She was desperate. You could see it in her eyes. I've seen that look before, in women who've lost children or can't have them. It's a pain that doesn't go away. Gladys's words echoed in Jonathan's mind. He remembered the nights he'd wake up and find Catherine silently crying in the bathroom, the endless doctor's appointments, the expensive treatments that always ended in disappointment. Martha, bring me last month's landline phone records, Jonathan requested. While Martha searched for the documents, Jonathan watched the baby nursing peacefully in Gladys's arms. The child had curly hair and big expressive eyes. Something about those features seemed vaguely familiar. Here you are, sir, Martha said, handing him a folder with the records. Jonathan examined the calls, several to unknown numbers, some lasting over an hour. He jotted down a few numbers, deciding to investigate later. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Martha went to answer it and returned with an elegant woman in her 60s. It was Barbara, Catherine's mother. Jonathan, dear, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I'm worried about Catherine, Barbara said, slipping her purse off her shoulder. She hasn't answered my calls for... Barbara stopped abruptly when she saw Gladys with the baby in the kitchen. Her face paled, and she steadied herself against the wall. My God, it can't be, she murmured, pressing a hand to her chest. Do you know this baby? Jonathan asked, alarmed by his mother-in-law's reaction. Barbara slowly approached Gladys and the baby, tears already streaming down her face. Catherine, what have you done, my girl? She whispered, reaching out to gently touch the baby's cheek. Barbara, for heaven's sake, tell me what's going on, Jonathan insisted, losing patience. Barbara took a deep breath and sank heavily into one of the chairs. Jonathan, there are things about my daughter you don't know. Catherine. She lost 3 pregnancies before you married. The last time was just 2 years ago, when you were trying for children. Jonathan felt the world collapse around him. What do you mean? She never told me about previous pregnancies, and 2 years ago we weren't trying for a baby 2 years ago. She was secretly taking birth control, Barbara revealed, the words coming out with difficulty. Catherine found out you told your partner that kids would interfere with your business. She overheard the phone call and was devastated. Jonathan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He vaguely remembered the conversation, but had been talking about his partner's young children, who always disrupted important meetings. He'd never referred to their own future children. Barbara, this is a terrible misunderstanding, said Jonathan, running his hands through his hair. I was talking about Michael's kids, not ours. Catherine got it all wrong. Gladys, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Parker, your wife told me you didn't want children. That's why she needed to care for other people's kids. She said she had a project. What project? Jonathan and Barbara asked at the same time. She didn't go into details, but she talked about helping abandoned children. Said if she couldn't be a mother the traditional way, she'd be one another way. Gladys's phone rang. She answered quickly and spoke in a low voice for a few minutes. When she hung up, she looked worried. I need to leave right away, said Gladys, standing up with the baby. There's an emergency at the place where I work. Wait, Jonathan shouted. You can't just take that child away without explaining anything. Mr. Parker, I'll be back first thing tomorrow. The baby is safe with me, I promise. Before Jonathan could protest, Gladys had already slipped out the back door with the baby, leaving only the faint scent of baby powder and an empty bottle on the table. Barbara and Jonathan sat in silence for a few minutes, processing everything. Jonathan, we need to find my daughter, Barbara finally said. I'm afraid of what she might be doing. Do you have any idea where she could be? Jonathan asked. Catherine always had a special connection with St. Anne Orphanage, where she volunteered before getting married. Maybe she's there. Jonathan grabbed the car keys. Let's go, I need answers. St. Anne Orphanage was on the north side of Chicago, in a simple, busy neighborhood. It was an old but well-kept building, with a front garden where a few children played under a nun's supervision. Good afternoon, sister, Jonathan greeted the nun who came to meet them. We're looking for Catherine Parker. She used to volunteer here." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Parker," replied Sister Margaret. "She was here a few days ago, very upset. She asked about adoption procedures and children who needed temporary homes." "Did she take any children from here?" Barbara asked anxiously. No, we follow all legal protocols here. But she mentioned knowing other situations, children in more vulnerable conditions." Jonathan and Barbara exchanged worried glances. "Sister, do you have any idea where my wife might be now?" Jonathan pressed. "Well, she mentioned an address in Wicker Park, said she'd rented a place for a special project. I wrote it down because she asked for donations of clothes and diapers." The nun fetched a notebook and found the address. It was a quiet street near the subway. 20 minutes later, Jonathan and Barbara stood in front of a simple but cozy house. The windows were open and they could hear children's voices inside. Jonathan rang the bell and the door was opened by a young woman in her 20s who looked nervous. "Good afternoon, we're looking for Catherine Parker," said Jonathan. The young woman hesitated before answering. She doesn't want to see anyone right now." "I'm her husband," Jonathan insisted. "Please, it's very important." The young woman led them to a spacious room where Jonathan received the shock of his life. Catherine was sitting on the floor, surrounded by 5 children of different ages, all very young. She was playing with them, but her eyes were red from crying. "Catherine," Jonathan called softly. She looked up, and her face transformed into a mix of surprise, fear, and sadness. "Jonathan, how did you find me?" she asked, quickly standing up. "Sweetheart, what is this place?" Barbara asked, looking around with concern. "It's a temporary home, Mum," Catherine explained, trying to maintain her composure, "for children who have nowhere else to go." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Catherine, we need to talk," Jonathan said, stepping closer to her. "There's a baby in our house with a woman named Gladys. Can you explain what's going on?" Catherine glanced at the children and then at the young woman who had opened the door. "Amber, could you take the children to the backyard?" she asked. When they were alone, Catherine broke down in tears. "Jonathan, I couldn't live that lie anymore," she sobbed. "You made it very clear that children would disrupt your life. So I decided that if I couldn't be a mother to your children, I'd be a mother to others." "Catherine, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," Jonathan said, taking his wife's hands. "I never said our children would disrupt my life. I was talking about Michael, about how his young kids always interrupt our meetings." Catherine stopped crying and looked at Jonathan in confusion. "What do you mean?" "But I heard you say clearly." "You heard part of a conversation out of context," Jonathan explained patiently. "Catherine, I've always wanted to have children with you. Why didn't you ever come to me to clarify this?" Because I already knew it was my problem," Catherine whispered. "Jonathan, I can't have children. The doctors confirmed it 6 months ago. It's final." Jonathan felt as if the world had stopped. Catherine had gone through this alone, carrying not just the pain of infertility, but also the belief that he didn't want children. "Catherine, why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Because I was afraid you'd leave me," she confessed. "And then, when I heard that conversation, I thought maybe it was for the best. You could move on without the burden of a wife who can't give you children." Barbara, who had remained silent, stepped closer to her daughter. "Catherine, my dear, you've carried this weight alone for too long, but running away wasn't the answer." "I didn't run away, Mom," Catherine defended herself. "I found a purpose. These children need care. Amber over there is a single mother of 2 and works overnight to support her family. The baby with Gladys was abandoned at the hospital where I was getting treatment." Jonathan began to understand the scale of what Catherine had created. "How many children are you helping?" he asked. 5 stay here during the day. Gladys cares for 3 more in their homes. And there are other families receiving financial support so they don't have to abandon their children." "Catherine, this is illegal," Jonathan said, worried. "You could face serious trouble." "I know the risks," Catherine replied. "But these children have no one else. The official system is slow and bureaucratic. While they wait for a family, they're left in terrible conditions." Jonathan looked around the house. Though simple, it was clean and welcoming. Toys were scattered. Drawings covered the walls, and the comforting smell of home-cooked food came from the kitchen. "How did you get the money for all this?" he asked. "I sold some jewelry, used our savings," Catherine admitted. "And I've received some donations from people who know about the work." "Catherine, you spent $50,000 without consulting me," said Jonathan, trying to stay calm. "I know it was wrong," she said, lowering her head. "But I thought you wouldn't mind since you didn't want kids anyway." Jonathan took a deep breath. It was clear the whole situation had stemmed from a huge misunderstanding, fueled by pain and silence between them. "Catherine, look at me," Jonathan asked, gently lifting his wife's chin. "I've always wanted to have children with you. Always. And when I found out you couldn't get pregnant, my first thought was adoption." "Really?" Catherine asked, her eyes filled with hope. "Really," Jonathan confirmed. "But I was also afraid to bring it up. After so many failed treatments, I thought you needed time." Barbara smiled through her tears. "You two are such fools," she said affectionately, "wasting months suffering alone because of pride and fear." Amber returned with the children, who ran to Catherine as if she were truly their mother. "Aunt Kathy, snack time was ages ago," complained a boy around 4 years old. "I'll get it ready now, Jacob," Catherine replied, stroking the boy's hair. Jonathan watched the interaction between Catherine and the children. It was obvious she'd found her maternal calling, even if in an unconventional way. "Catherine, what if we made this official?" Jonathan suggested. "A proper daycare, with all the necessary paperwork." "You'd do that?" Catherine asked, disbelieving. "We would do that," Jonathan corrected. "Together." One of the children, a girl about 3, tugged at Jonathan's pants. "Uncle, will you play with us?" she asked with a toothless grin. Jonathan crouched to her level. "What's your name, princess?" "Emily," she answered shyly. "Amber's mom can't take care of me because she works too much." Jonathan felt his heart warm. He looked at Catherine and saw the same emotion in her eyes. "Catherine, you're right," he said. "These children need care, and we can be the family they need." "But what about your work?" Catherine asked. "You always said your company was your priority." "The company can survive a few hours without me," Jonathan replied, smiling. "These children can't." Barbara hugged the couple. "Now you're talking like a real married pair," she said, facing problems together. Just then, Gladys arrived with the baby and 2 more small children. "Sorry for the delay," she said. "I had to pick up Annie and Peter from the neighbor's house." "Gladys," Jonathan called. "You knew Catherine before she showed up at your job, didn't you?" Gladys hesitated before answering. "Yes, sir, Catherine is my sister-in-law's cousin. When she came to the building, we already knew each other." "Why didn't you say so from the start?" Jonathan asked. "Because Mrs. Catherine asked me not to," Gladys explained. "She said she wanted to protect you from getting involved in something illegal." Jonathan shook his head, realizing how Catherine had planned everything to shield him. "Catherine, you thought of everything except the possibility of us talking like a married couple," he said. "I know," Catherine admitted. "I was so afraid of losing you that I ended up pushing you away instead." The baby in Gladys's arms began to cry, and Catherine instinctively reached for him. "How is he, Gladys?" Catherine asked, rocking the little one. "Fine, but the hospital called today. The biological family's lawyers want to speak with us about his situation." Jonathan's chest tightened. "What biological family?" "The baby's mother is very young," Gladys explained. "She abandoned him at the hospital, but the maternal grandmother came forward wanting custody." "Is that good or bad?" asked Barbara. "It depends," replied Catherine. "Is the grandmother capable of raising the child, or does she just want to because it's family?" Jonathan watched Catherine holding the baby and noticed how attached she already was to the child. "Catherine, regardless of what happens with these specific children, do you want to continue this work?" he asked. "More than anything in life," she answered without hesitation. "Then let's do it right," Jonathan decided. "We'll legalize everything, hire lawyers, social workers. We'll create a place where children can stay temporarily while they wait for adoption or until their families can care for them." Amber, who had overheard the conversation, approached timidly. "Mr. Parker, are you serious?" she asked. "Because me and other mothers really need a place like that." "I'm very serious," Jonathan confirmed. "What's your story, Amber?" "I have 2 small children and work from 11 at night to 7 in the morning at a factory," she explained. "During the day, I have no one to leave them with. My mother is elderly and can't handle them alone." "And the children's father?" asked Barbara. "Disappeared when he found out about the second pregnancy," Amber replied sadly. "I have no family here in Chicago. I came from the countryside looking for work." Jonathan felt anger toward the man who had abandoned Amber, but he also realized he was facing an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. "Amber, what if we offered you a job too?" he suggested. "Taking care of the children during the day while other mothers work." "You'd do that?" Amber asked, her eyes shining. "Catherine, what do you think?" Jonathan asked. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Catherine replied, smiling for the first time in a long while. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, in the following days, Jonathan and Catherine worked together to turn Catherine's informal project into something legal and sustainable. They hired a lawyer specializing in child and youth rights, who guided them through the necessary procedures. "You'll need to register a non-profit organization," explained Mr. Thompson during a meeting at the office, "and you'll have to register with the Municipal Council for Child and Youth Rights." "Is it a complicated process?" asked Catherine. "Bureaucratic, but not impossible," the lawyer replied. "The most important thing is that you demonstrate you have the physical and financial structure to provide proper care for the children." Jonathan had already decided to invest a significant portion of his personal savings into the project. He had also spoken with some of his company's clients about possible donations. "Mr. Thompson, what about the children already being cared for?" Jonathan asked. "We'll need to regularize each child's situation individually," the lawyer explained. "Some may be under informal temporary custody. Others may need to go through the official adoption system." Catherine felt her heart tighten at the thought of separating from the children, especially the baby who had arrived first. That afternoon, a social worker from Child Protective Services visited the house in Wicker Park. She was a serious, middle-aged woman who wrote everything down on a clipboard. "Mrs. Parker, I understand you have good intentions," said the social worker, Mrs. Wilson, "but what's happening here could be considered irregular foster care." "What does that mean?" Catherine asked nervously. "It means the children could be removed and taken to official shelters until the situation is regularized," Mrs. Wilson explained. "But they're well cared for here," Catherine protested. "They have food, affection, attention." "I see that," agreed Mrs. Wilson, "and that's why I'll give you 30 days to sort out the situation. If you can get the necessary documents, the children can stay here." After the social worker left, Catherine broke down in tears. "Jonathan, what if we can't get everything legalized in time?" she sobbed. "These children will be taken away from me and separated from each other." "We won't let that happen," Jonathan said firmly. "We'll work day and night if we have to." In the days that followed, Jonathan surprised himself with his dedication to the project. He left the business in the hands of his partners and spent most of his time handling paperwork, meeting with authorities, and renovating the house. One morning, while helping Amber serve breakfast to the children, Jonathan received an unexpected call. "Mr. Parker," said a woman's voice on the phone, "this is Jennifer from Mercy Hospital, about the baby in Gladys's care." "Yes, I'm listening," Jonathan replied, his heart racing. "The baby's maternal grandmother has given up custody," Jennifer informed him. "She realized she doesn't have the financial or physical means to care for an infant." "And now?" Jonathan asked. "The baby is available for legal adoption," Jennifer explained. "If you're interested and qualified, you can start the process." Jonathan hung up and rushed to share the news with Catherine. She was in the backyard, playing hide-and-seek with the children. "Catherine, we need to talk," he called. When he told her about the call from the hospital, Catherine fell silent for a long moment. "Jonathan, are you sure you want to adopt a child?" she finally asked. "I am," he answered without hesitation. "And you?" "I've loved that baby since the first day," Catherine admitted. "But I need to know you're doing this for the right reasons." "Catherine, 2 weeks ago, I was a work-obsessed businessman who thought kids were a nuisance," Jonathan said. "Now I can't imagine my life without these children running around the house. This isn't about making up for our infertility. It's about real love." Catherine hugged her husband, feeling truly united with him for the first time in years. "Then let's adopt our son," she said, smiling through her tears. The adoption qualification process moved faster than they expected, especially since their association project was already underway. 3 weeks later, they were in court with their lawyer, signing the papers that would make the baby officially theirs. "What will you name the child?" the judge asked. Jonathan and Catherine exchanged a glance. They had discussed this at length. "Ethan," they said together. "Ethan Parker." "That's a beautiful name," the judge remarked, smiling, "and very fitting for a child who's brought so much change to your lives." As they left the courthouse, Barbara was waiting for them with Gladys, Amber, and all the other children. There were balloons and a small chocolate cake. "Congratulations, Mom and Dad," the children cheered in unison. Jonathan lifted Ethan into his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. For the first time in his life, he was holding his son. "Thank you, Gladys," Jonathan said to the woman who had changed their lives. "If you hadn't shown up that day—" "Oh, Mr. Parker," Gladys laughed. "I just did what Mrs. Parker asked, though I admit, at first, I thought you'd call the police." "I considered it," Jonathan admitted, laughing. 2 weeks later, Ethan's temporary home was officially registered and running. The house in Wicker Park had been renovated to accommodate up to 12 children daily, meeting all the safety requirements of the health department. Amber was hired as the educational coordinator after enrolling in a child development course that Jonathan offered to pay for. Gladys became the general supervisor, responsible for the practical care of the children. "Catherine, do you remember when you thought your life had no purpose?" Barbara asked during a visit. "It feels like another lifetime," Catherine replied, watching Jonathan play with toy cars on the floor with 4 children. "Who would have thought my executive husband would turn into a diaper and bottle expert? And who would have thought my perfectionist daughter would be happy living in a constantly messy house?" Barbara laughed. "The house may be messy, but our hearts are in order," Catherine said philosophically. 6 months after the official opening of Ethan's temporary home, Jonathan received a call that would change their lives again. "Mr. Parker," a young voice said over the phone, "this is Brittany from the Social Services Center. We have an urgent situation. A mother with 3 young children needs temporary shelter. Her home was destroyed in a fire." "How old are the children?" Jonathan asked. 2, 4, and 6, Brittany replied. "The mother has no family in the city and is desperate." Jonathan looked at Catherine, who was bathing Ethan in the kitchen sink, the same sink where it had all begun. She nodded, already knowing what he would say. "Bring them in," Jonathan said. "We have room." When the family arrived that night, Jonathan and Catherine understood their journey was just beginning. The mother, Rachel, was a 30-year-old woman who cried with relief, seeing her children would have a safe place to sleep. "I don't know how to thank you," Rachel said, hugging her children. "You're angels." "We're not angels," Catherine gently corrected. "We're just people who've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and care." Jonathan watched the scene, his wife comforting a desperate mother, the children from the home playing with their new friends, Gladys preparing bottles for everyone, Amber setting up extra beds. This was the family he'd always wanted, but never knew he needed. That night, after all the children were asleep, Jonathan and Catherine sat on the living room couch with Ethan between them. "Do you regret anything?" Catherine asked. "I regret that we wasted so much time suffering alone," Jonathan replied. "But I don't regret anything that happened after we found Gladys in our kitchen. Sometimes I wonder what our life would have been like if none of this had happened," Catherine said thoughtfully. "It would have been empty," Jonathan answered without hesitation. "Rich, organized, quiet, and completely empty." Ethan yawned and snuggled between his parents. Outside, the sounds of the city continued, but inside that house was a peace Jonathan had never known before. "Catherine, "Do you think we've managed to save these children?" Jonathan asked. "No, Jonathan," she replied, kissing their son's forehead. "They're the ones who saved us." A year later, Ethan's temporary home had become a model on Chicago's North Side. They had helped over 50 families in temporary crisis, and 12 children had been adopted through partnerships with the official system. Jonathan, who once spent 12 hours a day at the office, now divided his time between his company and the home. He discovered it was possible to succeed in business and still have time to be a father and support social causes. Catherine fulfilled her dream of being a mother, not to one child, but to dozens who passed through her care. Each left a mark on her heart, even those who stayed only a few days. On a Saturday afternoon, as they organized a birthday party for Ethan, who was turning 1 year under their care, Jonathan paused to take in the scene. Amber was coordinating activities with the children. Gladys was handing out slices of cake. Barbara was telling stories to the little ones, and Catherine was photographing every moment with the brightest smile Jonathan had ever seen. "Daddy, come play!" shouted a 5-year-old girl, tugging at his hand. "I'm coming, Sophia," Jonathan replied, letting the child lead him. As he played hopscotch in the backyard, Jonathan reflected on how what had once seemed like a nightmare had turned into the greatest blessing of his life. He'd learned that sometimes life has to be turned upside down for us to discover what truly matters. Catherine approached him later in the afternoon, as the party was winding down and some of the children had already been picked up by their guardians. "Jonathan, I have something to tell you," she said with a mysterious smile. "What is it?" he asked, intrigued. "I spoke with Mr. Thompson today. There's a family interested in adopting the 2 little sisters who've been with us for 3 months, Catherine shared. "Is that good or bad?" Jonathan asked, knowing how emotional Catherine got when children left. "It's wonderful," she replied, surprising him. "They'll have a forever family with parents who love them, and will have space to help other children in need." Jonathan smiled, proud of the emotional maturity his wife had developed. "Catherine, you've become an even more incredible woman," he said, kissing her gently. "We've become a better couple," she corrected, "because we've learned to talk, to trust each other, and to work together for something bigger than ourselves." Ethan crawled around the backyard, exploring every corner with a baby's natural curiosity. Other children played around him, protecting him like older siblings. "Do you think Ethan will understand when he grows up that he was adopted?" Jonathan asked. "He'll understand that he was chosen," Catherine replied, "and that he's part of a family that chose love over fear." That night, after all the temporary children had been picked up and only Ethan slept in his crib, Jonathan and Catherine made plans for the future of their home. "I was thinking about expanding," Catherine said. "Maybe renting the house next door and helping more families." "You don't think we're doing enough already?" Jonathan asked. "Jonathan, there are so many mothers like Amber, like Rachel, who need help," Catherine explained. "If we have the means to help, why not do it?" Jonathan looked at his wife and saw a determination in her that hadn't been there before. Catherine had found her life's purpose, and he didn't want to hold her back. "All right," he agreed, "but on one condition." "What?" Catherine asked. "That we have at least one Sunday a month just for us and Ethan," Jonathan said. "I need time to just be a father and husband, not a social project coordinator." "Deal," Catherine laughed. "And I need time to just be a wife and mother, not a temporary home director." 2 years after that conversation, Ethan's temporary home had become a small non-profit organization, serving 3 neighborhoods on Chicago's North Side. They had 4 houses, 15 employees, and had already helped over 200 families. Jonathan discovered he had a talent for fundraising and corporate partnerships. Several business owners were inspired by his story and began supporting the project financially. Catherine became a well-known speaker, sharing her experiences at universities and conferences on motherhood and adoption. Her story inspired other women struggling with fertility issues. Ethan, now 3 years old, was a talkative and affectionate child who called Gladys Grandma Joe and Amber Auntie Murray. To him, family was everyone who lived in or regularly visited the home. "Daddy, why do some kids leave?" Ethan asked one afternoon after 2 little brothers had been adopted. Because they've found their forever families, Jonathan explained patiently. Like how I found you and Mommy. But I don't want anyone to leave, Ethan said sadly. Ethan, do you know what's more important than staying together? Jonathan asked. What? The boy replied. It's knowing that even when people are far apart, they still love each other, Jonathan explained. All the kids who've stayed here take a little piece of our love with them and leave a little piece of theirs with us. Ethan thought for a moment and then smiled. So our house has love from a whole bunch of kids? He asked. Exactly, Jonathan answered, hugging his son. Our home is made of love multiplied. At that time, Jonathan and Catherine were already thinking about adopting another child. They wanted Ethan to have a permanent brother or sister, not just the temporary ones who always came and went. The opportunity arose when a newborn baby was abandoned at the hospital and urgently needed a family. She was just a few days old and had health issues that would require special care in the first few months. She has Down syndrome, the social worker explained. Many families back out when they hear that. We won't back out, Catherine said immediately. When can we meet her? Catherine, are you sure? Jonathan asked, worried about the added responsibility. Jonathan, how many special needs children have come through here? Catherine replied. Little Sophia, who was hearing impaired. Jacob, who was autistic. We've learned that every child is special in their own way. Jonathan smiled, realizing Catherine was right. They already had experience caring for children with special needs and a strong support network. Okay, he agreed. Let's go meet our daughter. The baby was named Barbara, after Ethan's grandmother, who had passed away a few months earlier. She was tiny but had bright eyes and a smile that melted hearts. She's perfect, Catherine whispered, holding the baby for the first time. She's ours, Jonathan said, gently touching his daughter's tiny hand. Ethan adjusted quickly to his little sister. He helped Catherine with bottles, sang to Barbara when she cried, and always asked if she was okay. Ethan, you're the best big brother in the world, Catherine said one morning, watching him make silly faces to make his sister laugh. It's because you and Daddy taught me how to take care of people, Ethan replied seriously. The 3-year-old's words made Jonathan and Catherine realize they were raising a child with strong values of compassion and care for others. With 2 young children at home and the temporary home running smoothly, Jonathan and Catherine thought their lives were complete. But fate had other plans. One Friday afternoon, Gladys arrived with a worried expression. Mrs. Catherine, there's a situation, she said, pulling Catherine aside. What happened, Gladys? Catherine asked. My neighbor had to leave town suddenly because her mother is very sick, Gladys explained. She has an 8-year-old boy and no one to leave him with. And she wants him to stay here for a few days, Catherine asked. Actually, it's more complicated, Gladys said hesitantly. The boy has behavioral issues. He's been with 3 different families and none could handle him. What kind of issues? Jonathan asked, stepping closer to listen. He's aggressive, disobedient, and fights with other kids, Gladys explained. But Mrs. Catherine, I know this boy. He's not bad. He's just really angry about being abandoned so many times. Jonathan and Catherine exchanged glances. They had never cared for a child with serious behavioral issues before. What's his name? Asked Catherine. Tyler, answered Gladys. Tyler Davis. And before you ask, he's my nephew, my sister's son, who isn't with us anymore. It was the first time Gladys had spoken about family, and Jonathan and Catherine understood this was personal for her. Gladys, why didn't you ever tell us about Tyler? Catherine asked gently. Because I was ashamed, admitted Gladys, tears streaming down her face. My sister was addicted to drugs. She abandoned Tyler when he was 5. I tried to take care of him, but I couldn't. He was so angry and I didn't know how to help. Where is he now? Asked Jonathan. With a family who took him in temporarily, replied Gladys. But they won't keep him. They said he's too difficult. Bring him here, Catherine said without hesitation. Catherine, Jonathan began. Jonathan, Gladys is part of our family, Catherine interrupted, and if Tyler matters to her, he matters to us too. That night, Tyler arrived at the home carrying only a small backpack. He was a thin boy with dark hair and wary eyes. He didn't greet anyone and went straight to the room Amber had prepared. "He'll be okay," Catherine told Gladys, who was visibly worried. "Mrs. Catherine, Tyler isn't like the other kids who come through here," Gladys warned. "He doesn't trust adults. He thinks everyone will abandon him sooner or later." "Then we'll prove him wrong," Jonathan said firmly. The first few days with Tyler were challenging. He refused to join any activities, wouldn't speak to anyone, and had angry outbursts when contradicted. Ethan was frightened by the older boy's behavior. "Daddy, why does Tyler yell so much?" Ethan asked after witnessing one of his outbursts. "Because he's sad, son," Jonathan explained. "Sometimes when people are really sad, they get angry too." "Can I help him not be sad?" Ethan asked innocently. "How would you do that?" Jonathan asked curiously. "By giving him my teddy bear," Ethan replied. "When I'm sad, my teddy helps me." Jonathan's heart warmed at his son's generosity. That night, Ethan went to Tyler's room with his favorite stuffed bear. "Hey, Tyler," Ethan said shyly at the bedroom door. "I brought my teddy for you." Tyler looked at the younger boy in surprise. "Why?" he asked sharply. "Because you seem sad," Ethan answered simply. "And my teddy always helps me when I'm sad." Tyler was silent for a moment, watching Ethan hold out the toy. "I don't need a teddy," Tyler finally said, but without aggression. "That's okay," Ethan replied, unoffended. "But if you change your mind, you can come get it." It was the first sign Tyler was starting to lower his guard. In the days that followed, Jonathan and Catherine noticed him quietly observing the affectionate interactions between Ethan and Barbara, between the adults and the other temporary children. One evening at dinner, Tyler finally spoke up. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. "Do what, Tyler?" Catherine asked gently. "Take care of kids who aren't yours," Tyler clarified. "Because every child deserves to be cared for," Jonathan answered. "And because helping others makes us feel good too." "But you know people leave," Tyler insisted. "Everyone always leaves." "That's true," Catherine agreed. "Some people leave, but others stay. And the love we share will never go away." Tyler processed the response in silence. It was clear he was testing the boundaries, trying to understand if Jonathan and Catherine were different from the other adults who had passed through his life. 2 weeks later, Gladys's neighbor returned from her trip and came to pick up Tyler. But when she arrived at the home, she got a surprise. "Aunt Susan, I want to stay here," Tyler said to the woman. "Tyler, you can't stay," Susan replied. "This family is already doing so much by taking care of you temporarily." "Actually," Catherine interrupted, "we'd like to talk about the possibility of Tyler staying with us permanently." Susan looked surprised, first at Catherine, then at Tyler. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Tyler can be very difficult." "All children can be difficult sometimes," Jonathan answered, "but Tyler is part of our family now." It was then that Tyler finally cried, not out of anger or frustration, but relief. For the first time in his life, someone was choosing to stay with him. The adoption process for Tyler was more complicated than Ethan's and Barbara's due to his history of abandonment and the legal issues involved. But 6 months later, he officially became Tyler Parker. "Dad," Tyler said one night as Jonathan helped him with his homework, "thank you for not giving up on me." "Tyler, family doesn't give up on each other," Jonathan replied, hugging his son. "We'll always be here for you no matter what." Now, 5 years after that morning when Jonathan found Gladys bathing Ethan in the kitchen sink, the Parker family had grown in ways they never could have imagined. Ethan, at 8 years old, was a responsible and caring boy who helped look after the younger children in the home. Barbara, at 5, was a joyful and determined child who didn't let her Down syndrome limit her in any way. And Tyler, at 13, had become a protective teenager who used his difficult past to help other troubled kids who arrived at the home. Ethan's temporary home had become a national model for foster care. Jonathan and Catherine received invitations to speak across the country, sharing how a marital crisis had turned into a life's purpose. "Catherine, do you remember what our life was like before?" Jonathan asked one Sunday afternoon as they watched their 3 children play in the backyard. "I remember," Catherine replied. "It was organized, predictable, and empty." Now it's chaotic, unpredictable, and full of love. "Which do you prefer?" Jonathan asked, though he already knew the answer. "I prefer the life full of love," Catherine answered without hesitation. "Always." Gladys, now 65, had become the children's official grandmother. Amber had graduated with a degree in education and become the home's educational director. Other staff had been hired, but the original core remained united. "Mrs. Catherine," Gladys said one afternoon, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to your house that day." "You would have come anyway," Catherine replied with a smile. "Because it was fate. I needed to learn that family isn't about blood, it's about choice and love." "And Mr. Jonathan needed to learn that success isn't just measured by money," Gladys added. "That's true," Catherine agreed. "Now he measures success by how many smiles we can create in a day." That evening during family dinner, Jonathan made a special announcement. "Kids, your mom and I have some news to share," he said. "Are you adopting another baby?" Ethan asked excitedly. "No, not this time," Catherine laughed. "We've decided our family is complete with the three of you." "So what's the news?" Tyler asked. "We're opening another home," Jonathan announced, "on the south side of the city. And you're going to help us choose the name." "How about Barbara's temporary home?" suggested Ethan. "Or Tyler's temporary home?" suggested Barbara. "No," said Tyler thoughtfully. "How about Hope Temporary Home? Because that's what you give these children, hope." Jonathan and Catherine exchanged glances, moved by their eldest son's maturity. "Hope Temporary Home," repeated Catherine. "It's perfect." 2 years later, when the second home was fully operational, Jonathan and Catherine reflected on everything they had accomplished. They had already helped over 500 families, facilitated hundreds of adoptions, and changed the lives of thousands of children. But for them, the greatest achievement wasn't the numbers or the public recognition. It was the realization that love multiplies when shared, and that family is so much more than blood ties. "Jonathan," Catherine said one night as they tucked Barbara into bed, "have you ever wondered where we'd be if we hadn't gone through that crisis?" "Probably still trying to have biological children and being unhappy," Jonathan replied. "Always, why do you ask?" "Because I want to thank you," said Catherine, "for joining me on this crazy journey." "Catherine, you're the one who saved me," Jonathan corrected. "Before all this, I was just a financially successful businessman, but poor in everything that truly matters." "We saved each other," Catherine concluded. "And we saved our children in the process." Ethan, now 10, appeared at the bedroom door. "Dad, Mom, can you come see something?" he asked. "What is it, son?" Jonathan asked. "Tyler is helping a new kid not have nightmares," Ethan explained. "He's telling funny stories to make her laugh." Jonathan and Catherine went to the room where Tyler, now 15, was sitting beside the bed of a 6-year-old girl who had arrived at the home that week. And then the duck said to the chicken, "Hey, you forgot to lay an egg today," Tyler narrated, using different voices for the characters. The girl laughed, momentarily forgetting the trauma that had brought her there. "Uncle Tyler, tell another one," she begged. "Just one more and then promise you'll sleep," Tyler bargained. "I promise," the girl replied. Jonathan and Catherine watched from the hallway, tears in their eyes. Seeing Tyler, who had arrived so angry and distrustful, now tenderly caring for other children, was proof that love truly transforms. "Catherine," Jonathan whispered, "our children are becoming amazing people." "They're learning what we learned," Catherine whispered back, "that taking care of one another is what makes us truly human." End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of this story of resilience and love. Do you believe crises can turn into opportunities? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know if you've heard similar stories. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories about family and hope. Thank you so much for joining us.